Collision Course is back. Schedule will be on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective.
Hello?
I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and co-host Jenny Vaught as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo chip? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hey everybody, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes on Revolution Radio. You can find us at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And while you're there, you can look at the funding page because we are listener supported. We all volunteer our time to have a radio network and all the functions of the network, and including the hosts. Also, while you're there, you can go to Schedule A, scroll down to the B. You'll see the bee with the pollen on its legs flying towards a flower at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you click on the bee, you can find out information about me, and also probably some contact information if you want to contact me. Today is, let's see, I think today is the last Saturday of the month, which means we're kind of starting to head into the spring activities and getting land, you know, maybe working on your garden beds, getting things prepared for spring so that you can plant seeds and sprout yourself again onto the land. So today and coming into February, we're going to have more people that are landscape and natural permaculture farming, native seed people, to large scale restoration, to give us some motivation to get out there and start preparing our garden and getting in touch with growing seeds and maybe some food and some thoughts like that. So today I have Pete Van Dyck on my show again, and he has Drought Proof Texas, and he is a return guest. You can find the previous show in the archives on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And so today I'm trying to get my head on farming. I've been in political mode for a while, a couple months, so political and legal mode. So I'm trying to get myself grounded and get ready for the conversation today, which I'm looking forward to because I'm ready to start shoveling again. So this brings it into better perspective. So, hey, Pete, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, all right. So did you think about anything, since our last show, or any kind of topics that you wanted to bring forward? And, always include, other information that you may have talked about on the previous show in case there are listeners that, are not familiar with you. Do you want to throw us out just a little bit of your background? Just to remind the people? Yeah, awesome.
Well, I grew up in Oklahoma City area, and as soon as I graduated high school, I joined the military, and I was in the Navy for 6 years. And once I got done with that, I moved to Texas, where a lot of my family still lives. And ever since then, I've just been getting into permaculture and doing sustainable design. And in the past 4 years, I've done over 100 projects around Central Texas, and done a lot of great soil and water conservation work. In fact, right now I am at a local farm here in Elgin, Texas, and it is a nonprofit farm that's run by this Multicultural Refugee Coalition. And so we're out. It's a multicultural refugee run and organized farm. And right now our nonprofit Earth Repair Corps is here, and we have about 40 volunteers out at this farm. We're installing some fencing and doing some irrigation and planting a bunch of trees and moving some mulch and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'd like to talk to you more about this event that we're having, if that's all right.
Yeah, go right ahead. The other thing too is, I know that sometimes people think what the word multicultural means, but could you explain to me, particularly where you're at, what multicultural looks like?
Well, some of these folks, they are from Africa, and we have some folks from India, and I think some folks from the Middle East are here. It's mostly women, and there's a few younger men. They're all really great people, and they're just trying to have a farm and grow some organic crops and sell some high value crops here locally in town.
Awesome. Well, sometimes people, in America, I think people don't really understand kind of sometimes what multicultural is, or
Sure.
what community is. And, because I've found that in the past, dealing with lots of different communities, I've had to kind of learn to be kind of more of a team player, right? What's good for the whole. And that takes, some time to learn. And so that, it can be more effective. So it's good. It's awesome. I love that you're on that farm and you're, helping out.
Yeah, and so about maybe 6 months ago or maybe 8 months ago, they actually paid me to come out and dig some soil and water conservation terraces on their farm. And so it's like these level terraces that we use to harvest water and manage the runoff that comes through the farm. And on the berm of the terrace is they have planted a lot of annuals and cover crops throughout the summer, and now we're getting ready to plant a bunch of perennials onto those berms. And so they're going to be fruit trees and stuff like blackberries and stuff like that.
Cool. Well, I'm excited. There are people out there that are actually shoveling right now. So I'm in the freezing still with lots of ice. So
are you? Now, it's like 55 to 60 degrees here right now. Cloudy, beautiful day.
Yeah, sounds good. It sounds really good. So do you want to explain to people kind of like what permaculture, berming is? Give them some insights of how that works, what it looks like, and how it conserves water. And then it becomes like a natural landscape that, nature takes care of eventually. So it's like, a food forest that you don't have to, spend huge amounts of time at, like, line farming, you know what I mean, or large crop farming. And it produces, food indefinitely and forever. You want to talk a little bit about those ideas?
Sure. Yeah. Well, here on this farm, the place that we did the conservation terraces on is in more of a hillside. So it's in one of the steeper areas of the farm, and they had quite a bit of runoff from the land above coming down and flooding one of their roads. So we use the terraces to harvest that water, and they're able to do that because I use a mini excavator to dig out a basin, and that basin is level. So whenever water comes downhill, it flows 90 degrees from contour, and if you dig a trench that's level, water is just going to sit in there. And the soil that comes out of that basin is put downhill, and I shape it into a nice pretty berm, and that's basically a structure that's built to last for 100 years or more, because we have spillways strategically placed all along this structure that allow the water to exit when there's too much. So it's really stable, really strong, and we're planting all these perennials in there as like it's basically like a big garden bed that's on contour, and it's perfect for growing trees. And as far as maintenance goes, I think in this situation it's going to help them out a lot because it is on a hillside, and it's allowing them to grow food in a place where otherwise they wouldn't try to grow anything. So that was kind of our strategy there. But yeah, it's all about soil and water conservation, and we actually have done probably about 50 of these events here in Central Texas at elementary schools, public and private schools, community centers, and organic farms, and special nonprofit farms like this, and also at homesteaders places. We've done a lot of work doing this stuff, and it brings together the community. And the interesting thing about permaculture is that it's bringing together all these different kinds of people who wouldn't normally get together, and they're sort of unified around one thing, which is the care of the earth and the creation of this more sustainable community. And it's pretty cool to see all these people get together. Now, once they get to know each other and hang out for too long or too much time, then they start to get on each other's nerves, so we have to take a break. It's tricky, bringing all those different kinds of cultures together and different backgrounds, and then working together. You have to be really, I guess, open-minded and tolerant and patient, and it's kind of been a something that's been personal growth for me to be able to get out and do that.
Yeah, so early on when I was going out doing a lot of community stuff, I've worked on and helped, and like you, I've gone places, and not as much as you. I wish it was as much as you, but and helped to educate people, teach them how to grow food and microbial mass and stuff. But every time early on I'd go to another community, starting like 2006 when I started traveling more. The personal growth was huge because I realized all the communication skills that I had derived over time were not good enough to be in a community. And so, it was a radical being in communities and working alongside of them and everything else was really a radical change for me personally. And just my whole, process about, living. Well, I think it goes kind of more of my belief systems towards, the native way or the road, all my relations. So how do I relate, with everything around me, and how do I assist it to keep it in balance? And then how do I stay in balance in the process? And then live out the work, find a place where you can, the things that you're passionate about, there's a place for, right? And other people and their passions too, working together. But yeah, it's major. It's a major. You were in the Navy, so I mean, you were kind of like in a community. But what's the difference between that community and, like, say, the community you're working on today?
Well, when I was in the Navy, I was a SEAL, so I was a very warrior-oriented community where it was really great, because that's where I learned a lot of teamwork and cooperation with other people and business skills and stuff like that. But the people I'm working with now are much more sensitive and much more interested in their natural surroundings. And I wouldn't say easier to work with, because the people I worked with in the military were all very professional and good at what they did. But here it's just different. It's more family oriented. It's more peaceful, and we're getting something done that I think is more useful and more worthwhile. You know what I mean? And it's not just the people and the personal growth, dealing with all these different people at these events. We have all these actual professionals who come and help do the work, and they're actually training us to do stuff. So I've learned a lot of actual applicable skills to my own business, different surveying techniques, irrigation techniques, different times to plant things, So if anybody is really interested in getting into gardening or getting back into gardening, then, I'd recommend going to something like this, because you never know what you might learn, or who you might find that can help you.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things when I was traveling a lot. I haven't really so much, but I'm really looking for. I've got a few places, but this year I'm going to start doing native seed outgrows. So I'm still waiting for my, the funding for my land to finish up for my combat veterans program, where we're going to, do 2-year apprenticeships with full scale, like biodynamic farming is kind of like the center, and then large scale land restoration and all kinds of stuff to kind of train people, to get out in their communities, go back to where they're from, and they can, start applying these skills in their communities and start growing food, in a city, on a, outside of the city area, or full scale farm or whatever else kind of a thing, because I think it's pretty important myself. But one of the things I would get invited to go, say, be at a particular place for 4 months and build a core food production and teach people and educate people about how to develop microbial mass using like biodynamic composting methods, which are a lot different than the regular ones. But I would end up, there would always be people that were interested in what I had to teach, but there were always other people that had amazing, other ideas or systems or thoughts, and I'd spend lots of time with those people, like picking their brain, so like that does happen. You're like, sometimes you're like, wow, you know what?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But those sort of people are drawn to sustainable design and permaculture because it's this new thing, and people are just hungry for it because they're tired of eating poison food, and they're tired of living in landscapes that are just surrounded by all this destruction, and I think the more we separate ourselves from this natural world that we live in, the less our connection gets to the value of it, and you start to lose your sight on the real value of natural resources in the world, and instead you're just exploiting all the time.
Well, and I think, just to add to that, I think we're in a time period where if we don't start returning back to the land, we're already in big trouble with what's wrong with the soils worldwide, and we're not going to have the ability to feed people. And I think it's ludicrous, short-term solutions, which we shouldn't have to get to, is large scale indoor farming, which can have a lot of its own problems, using a lot of fish fertilizer and stuff to water stuff. Eventually fish will mutate and get diseases because you can't just keep them in boxes. You know what I mean? And if they start to eat each other and cannibalize them from a medical perspective, then they can get like the same kind of diseases like mad cow, but it's more like mad fish, and cause neurological problems in humans. So people have to be really careful. And I think, for me personally, one of my giant pet peeves is that these people are always sidestepping nature. And they'll create a supplement, like this supplement now, it's called Carbon 60. And I tell people, like, okay, if you went out into your backyard and you started building microbial mass and doing sustainable gardening and farming in your own yard, and you cured your soil in your own yard and your trees and all this other stuff, and planted food and had a little ecosystem back there, you would get all the positive carbon that you could ever need. It would come up through your feet, in your hands, through the soil you're touching, through breathing, and into your skin. Because we have a lot of degenerative diseases because of the lack of positive carbon in our bodies, right? So we have a lot more physical pain, and this is all from the carbon. And so there's no way that you're going to be able to take a supplement, or you're going to be able to do an aquaponic thing and ever get the positive carbon back. The only way that you can get that is from the soil. And the fact that people create supplements for nutritional deficiencies when it all goes back to the soil, right? It just totally blows me away. Or they sidestep the fact that they have to do land restoration, that is something that's needed. If we don't restore the land and soil, we are in big trouble, folks, period. And the story on multiple levels. But anyway, go ahead, Pete. I'll let you throw down.
Well, I think the supplement industry is just it's kind of a side effect of our degradation of the soils. It's like you have a great Rudolf Steiner quote in your email. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically like, if you don't have the right nutrition, you can't connect your will to your imagination. Basically, you can't experience life to the fullest if you're just eating like macaroni and cheese day in and day out. You're not gonna get everything you need to think properly. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we have so many of these mass shootings, and people are just nuts because they just don't have, they were never even exposed to any real nutrition in their life. And we've gotten that far, you know. And
yeah, we're like in my practice, I can see sometimes, like, 5 generations now of nutritional deficiencies. So now, after you have a couple generations, it starts to genetically become, hereditary. And so then you lose the your plugins in your body and your cells that even absorb that kind of nutrient, or that your body would even look for that nutrient or know how to metabolize it. And so we're at, there's, like, say for example, glycine is an amino acid that most people don't ever get in their diet. I mean, if you do bone broth right and you eat a lot of it, you may get some. So you have to take it as a supplement, because it's a primitive one. It's from when we would have eaten bones, ground bone, marrow, tendons and ligaments is where this amino acid would come from. But it does a lot of things. It helps people to sleep, and it helps all these other things. So, you've got 5 generations of a lack of glycine, because those kinds of things are not in our diet, because we don't do animal husbandry. So we don't slaughter our own animals to get those types of nutrient and also, animal parts to eat and make soups from. And it becomes like a major problem. I mean, lack of sleep can cause serious shooting, could make you seriously, like, suicidal and homicidal.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And I'm glad you're out there talking about that and getting the word out, because I think, a lot of our problems in society and pretty much everything boils down to, what we've done to the land, and the degradation that's happened is basically reflected in our own flesh. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, but I think, almost like every spiritual text out there, because I've been on different communities, and a lot of them have strict belief systems, whatever the belief system of the community is. Usually there's always kind of a religious theme. Even in biodynamics, we have the Steiner, we have Rudolf Steiner spiritual theme. But I think in almost every spiritual text, it says things like, you're created from the earth or the soil, and to the soil you shall return.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your body is created from, well, I mean, if you look at the Christian system, I mean, most spiritual, I was trying to think of a quote, but most spiritual texts will say that, so that your body is like the same as the soil, and the same as, and I tell this story all the time, Pete. I'll just tell it real quick. So one of my doctors that I used to have, but the government will not leave this guy alone. He was medically licensed in 4 states. He was doing triage on the battlefield as a doctor in Vietnam right out of school. And slowly over his career in life, he became holistic. He created the homeopathic board in Arizona and the homeopathic board in Nevada, which are the 2 only homeopathic boards in the nation. But he did dark field hematology. And the reason why we really got along, the reason why it was really good for me to get out of kind of the being, a traditional osteopath and all those, alternative medicine, and step back. And I do have some Western medicine, and get back into farming, is because there were a whole bunch of things that I couldn't figure out on the holistic medicine end. And until I went back to farming and started really understanding microbial mass and a lot of these other things, I didn't really understand how the body worked. But once I figured out how the soil worked, and the soil is identical to the body.
Oh.
And so
Oh.
when I go see him, they take a pinprick of your blood, they put it under a microscope, dark field hematology, and they look at your blood on the microbial level, which is way, 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 way below the cell, right? Because once the mutation gets to the cell, then you've already got a problem, right? Now you have cellular replication of whatever is wrong at the microbial level. And so I remember one of the first times I went to him, because I had brain cancer and I cured it, but I used to go to him to have him look at my blood just to make sure that we're good, right? You know, there's nothing in there that I have to start combating before it becomes a cellular problem. And he took the blood, he put it in the thing, and we were looking at it, and I see this little, it goes below the cell into the microbes. So there's these little worms and stuff like that. And your blood microbial is a trip, right? It's like a whole other universe. And I said, oh God, you know, I haven't done a parasite cleanse in a while. And cause I saw the little worms in there, and he said, oh, no. He goes, you don't have any, big parasitic problems. And he said, we don't want you to clean yourself parasitically so much that these little worms are not in your blood, because you need those in order to, consume the old stuff, break down the old stuff, and then, put it back into your system as something positive and that can be used. And that's what inflammation is in the body, basically, is when your microbial structures are now degenerating you, right? So they're tearing you down and not building you up. They're just doing the tear down. So you start to actually decompose at a rapid rate. Once you get inflammation, then you get every other disease that comes with inflammatory disease. And everything's an inflammatory disease. So if you don't treat your blood like you would a compost, like learning the basic, composting structures and becoming successful with compost, like you don't even have a relationship with your body or how your body really works at a microbial level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's amazing once you learn, the basics of soil life, how like these windows of understanding just sort of pop up in your, right in front of you, like an aha moment,
Yeah, nature is the best teacher. She's got a lot to say. She's very old. Oh, no. Yeah, like I have this guy on who has, he's native, but he also is a seed collector of native seeds. He has the largest collection of native seeds, corn. And he has like crazy interesting philosophies about nature and how nature works. And he said, like, with some of these seeds that he has gotten recently, they're like 5,000 years old, and he said, they're way older than we are. We can't possibly begin to know or fathom like what that seed knows.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's collected, he talks about it, how it's collected all this data over all these, periods. Kind of like a
Absolutely.
Computer chip, kind of a thing. So, yeah. Okay, so what do you want to talk about? So, do you want to talk about anything like you've learned since we've talked to you a couple months ago, or do you want to talk about work that you're doing or interesting things that are coming across your desk? So Go ahead, talk about some stuff.
We've been really blessed this year. We've just started another permaculture design course that we host at our place, and we've actually got some really great students. There's a entity in Texas known as the Edwards Aquifer Authority, and they basically have a lot of land that is purchased through tax dollars that they protect with, and they use that for aquifer protection, so water quantity and quality. And so we've got 3 of their members, including a board member, attending our course, which is pretty phenomenal. And we just started our first weekend of that design course about a week ago. So we're doing a 6-month course that's 1 weekend per month, so 6 weekends. And I'm really excited about working with these new students, and especially with these Edwards Aquifer Authority folks, because the potential for that is amazing. They have about 1 million acres of land, I believe, that they protect here in Central Texas, and they want to, instead of purchasing more land to protect, I think they're going to start doing some soil and water conservation treatments on their land that they already have, which I think is probably one of the best things they could do. Instead of just letting that land sit there and kind of atrophy with no human activity, we could actually go in there and put some bandages on some of these really bad eroding spots and fix it up so they're actually accomplishing the mission that they state that they have. So that's one of the best things that's been happening. I've been sort of approached by the city of Austin to do some soil and water conservation projects on their protected lands that the city owns. So my business is growing right now, and a lot of these government organizations are starting to take notice of what we're doing, and they're actually trying to hire us to come do the work. So I'm pretty excited about that. The only thing is
awesome. That's
yeah.
super awesome, because the other thing too is that even land that's been purchased up or whatever to conserve has a lot of issues, that needs to be fixed and cleaned up, and some new plants brought in and whatever else to help build, bee and bird and bat populations. So, you can't let stuff sit too long before you go in there and you start kind of, doing some new stuff to it. So that's exciting, because bees really need food. We need to have more wild and kind of native bees living in, more of their natural kind of settings for their survival.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of these protected lands, they're just sort of left idle, and sometimes they decide to do management practices that are actually bad for the land, and so it'd be great to divert some of that money into what we're doing. What I'm learning though is it's very difficult to work with these government organizations. They have all kinds of insurance requirements, and a lot of the projects we have to fund up front and then get reimbursed later. So, it's been a pretty big step for my business, trying to get all these insurance requirements that they have, and also finding the line of credit to get the jobs accomplished.
Yeah.
So I've been learning quite a bit about how to work with these folks.
No, I went through a lot of that stuff. I even went to this program at this college, nonprofit program with this college, so that I could grant write, and write outreach, from my nonprofit, business type stuff. And I never really got any of the grants. It was difficult. And it really wasn't really that successful with the whole thing, no matter how much I learned and how to deal with, these different types of agencies to try to get some of the money to help do the right thing and do my work. And that part is tough. Super tough.
And what I found with that is it's not really what you know, but who you know.
Yeah.
With the grant. Like sometimes folks just have like this opportunity or grant that, not that many people know about. And so we actually won a grant for the city of Austin.
Right on.
For $110,000.
Oh my God.
I didn't know anything about grant writing, but it just so happened that the person we were writing this proposal for, they basically were going to get it no matter what. So we lucked out there, and so that part. See, once you get past that part, you still have to have all these other things that, which is where I'm now. It's tough. There's a lot of red tape, and I feel like sort of uncertain about, not the trustworthiness of the people I'm working with, but of the system overall, and hoping that they're going to take care of me once everything is done.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like, whether it's legal, whether it's medical, whether it's financial, whether it's business related, there's two totally different, paradigms. There's the private and then there's the public. And the
Yep.
public operates completely, totally different than the private. Doing like private healthcare, that I do. I don't deal with the outside public a lot. And then when I do, then I have all these, other issues.
Yeah.
I have all these other issues from all these different organizations who either are trying to put me out of business or take a piece of my pie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then regulate, my pie.
Well, yeah, like it's interesting, because I've built my business working with private clients, and it's been really great and fulfilling, and I want to keep working with those people because that's like the base of my business. But it's hard to pass up these opportunities with these government operated agencies just because of the potential. But as soon as you get into that, all of a sudden you have to have a banker. You gotta get in good with a bank and start working with them, and you have to work with bigger commercial insurance agencies, and I feel like it's sucking me into this corporate world that I'm not entirely comfortable with. But I don't know. I guess it's worth it. What do you think?
Well, you've got a good start. I mean, a better start than most usually when they move into the public. I just got to a point where, I went through this period where I ended up citizen lobbying in the state of Nevada. There were only 8 of us. 7 of them were each from really conservative religions, but amazing legal people that, tried to keep the civil rights in the state of Nevada. They were older. And so I learned from them, but we were against like 890 paid lobbyists. And the bill that brought me in was this bill to eradicate any kind of nutrient or alternatives for like medicine at all. I mean, you could have gone to jail and be arrested by the cops for vitamin C. I mean, this was how ridiculous all this was. And before the bill passed, they decided to come after all of us holistic practitioners, right? Because there's not licensing across the board for a lot of different holistic stuff. It just wouldn't be viable. You can't have those kind of individual boards. And so I did that 100 hours a week, researched, testified, learned law, fought bills, 1,500 bills in like 6 months. And that kind of started a period of my life where I started kind of what I call the paperwork period, where, like I was more interested in trying to write grants and all this other stuff because I got into the paperwork period. But for me, and, I really hope things are changing. And I think some states they're more motivated. But for me, all the paperwork pushing just led to nowhere. I mean, nothing really ever got done or changed. And I couldn't get enough money or support to actually do a lot of the work that I was doing. And I created kind of such a stink in Reno that the city of Reno, well, no, because I'm like, there's no food in the desert. You know what I mean? There's like zero. And in order to turn sand into dirt, then you've got to turn it into soil, right? I mean, you're like a Jesus Christ kind of walking on water. I mean, it's like a miracle kind of a thing. It takes time. So I kept calling people who had empty lots in the city. I had realtor friends of mine that were calling people to see if they would. I had a nonprofit. I had put it all together. Was trying to get money and stuff and seeing if people would let me use their corner lots in the city development so that I could create, positive carbon places and places where people can, hold chickens and get chicken eggs and, learn composting and have food growing there and then give them seed support and whatever else they need in their area, to support different, backyard grows. and just was met with like so much opposition. So last year, some people called me and said that the city of Reno has a position available for community gardener for community gardens. I was like, well, that's right up my alley. I mean, that's all I've been doing for 15 years, right? And so I started calling around trying to figure out who was holding the job position and how to get a hold of it. And then finally somebody called me back and said, well, it's not really a real position. They said we had to put it out there, but we're not really taking applications for it. And I was like, wow. So you're trying to make the people and the public think you are doing something about this. You are trying to help with their education and the food deserts and, you know, all this other stuff. But in reality, it's a fraud. You've committed fraud on the population. So that was kind of the end of me, you know, after 15 years pushing the paperwork thing. And the other thing too is like, I think what really becomes difficult is I think it's super important that you're doing what you're doing. And if you can get like, you know, cities and the state involved, hell yeah, I think it is. But the other thing too is eventually it takes away from what you really want to do, because you can't find the people to do all your paperwork and your logging. Because when you get grants, it has to be specific, because if they end up auditing you over it at any point over 5 years, up to 5 years, and they feel that you spent the money in a way that the grant wasn't, I mean, they can sue you for all the money back and the interest on it.
Right.
And
yeah.
So
well,
it's the paperwork. Yeah, for me, it was just it got to be I spent more time at a desk and teaching other people to do the work that I really wanted to do, which was dealing with the land and the dirt, right? And not sitting at a computer. So, yeah. So this year I decided that, you know, when spring comes, I've got like 5 different locations of possibility that I can start doing native seed outgrows. And that's what I'm going to do for the summer. So I'm going to get away from my computer and everything else to get away from that period of my life, which I'm calling the paperwork period, and getting out full time and being 100% on the dirt. So that's just my feedback. Hopefully that's not negative or positive or negative, but
no, it's pretty much exactly how I feel, and I'm approaching it very crab-like. I'm actually Cancer astrologically, so I've just been sort of crabbing around, you know, circling around, waiting for my, like, you know, waiting for the right moment to know that I'm going to be okay, you know?
Right. Well, and the other thing too is like, you know, you crabs are nesters. And so what's best for you guys is to have your little area where you're at and have your, you know, your own little cave and your little home nest. That's where you guys thrive. Local. You would thrive at a very local level.
Yeah. And I have that, you know, we actually have 53 acres near the headwaters of the Blanco River here in Central Texas, and it's really, I mean, it's picturesque. You couldn't find a more beautiful property in Central Texas, and we've got huge opportunities there, and I really enjoy being there. And you know, we've got about 13 acres of agricultural land that we have big plans for. And there's so much work to be done just there on that property that I could probably spend the rest of my life just doing that. And I find that to be very appealing. But there's also a lot of folks who are encouraging me to continue on with the work that I'm doing. So you know, it's one of those things where there's opportunity everywhere as soon as you start doing the right things, and then the hardest part is figuring out where you're going to be most happy for your own self. You know?
Yeah, definitely not getting lost in all the processes, and that sometimes happens. I kind of feel like the last 4 years I've gotten lost in the kind of the paper process of trying to, you know, make things happen instead of kind of staying put. I'm a Sag, And I have a stellium in Sag. And so I'm the traveler. I'm the opposite of you. I'm the non-nester who travel like far and wide, nomadic. You know, if I could have a mule and a wagon, I would be happy and tools
Yeah.
and, you know, all the stuff that I need and go from place to place. I would just be super, super happy. I think I live in the wrong time period for sure.
Yeah.
But my midheaven is Cancer. And so now I'm kind of, as I've, you know, I turned 50 this year. So now I'm kind of like, I really want to have like one place where I can sit for long periods of time and, you know, just look at a tree, you know, watch a tree grow from, you know, a seed to, you know, however long I'm going to live. And watch it through that process, you know, and like document it and think about it, you know, more of the, I guess maybe a contemplation period. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, originally I started my business doing soil and water conservation and permaculture design, helping people select properties. You know, it's really fulfilling work. And the reason I started that was because I wanted to have my own land and, you know, grow my own food and be self-sustaining. And, you know, all of a sudden everything happened so fast. And and now I have the opportunity to do that. But I also have like this huge business opportunity that's just presented itself to me. And, you know, it's one of those things where you gotta figure out I think it's most important to look after yourself. Honestly, that's what I'm starting to realize is the best thing to do is really just go after that self-sustaining goal, and you know, it's fulfilling, and that way you're not being a problem for everyone else. You know, a drain on resources or whatever.
Yeah, I think, you know, biggest place that, and then we're going to go to break at 56 till. So, and it'll be break for 4 minutes. So you can just mute and go get a coffee or do whatever you need to do and then come back on. But one of the big things I notice, you know, as I'm kind of, the last couple of years I've been really working on the red road, or, you know, my path, my spiritual path, and how I relate, you know, to the world outside of me. And one of the things that makes it really noticeable is when I live by a schedule, you know, the last, you know, 10 years I've had like a major schedule, unless I've gone to places and worked off the land for a few months, and then I'm totally off grid. But, you know, and then the other part of me is like living sustainably and working a garden or whatever else, is that I just do what shows up during the course of the day. You know, it's like the nature leads me around, right? The outside leads me around during the course of my day, and not, you know, what I have written down on a schedule.
Yeah.
And because you lose relating, you know, when you have a schedule, you're not usually always having the time that you need to relate to another person or relate to an animal, or, you know, just pay attention to what that animal's doing, you know, shows up in your space and what's it doing, what's it trying to show me. And when I'm on a schedule, I don't have time to stop and go, yeah, okay, yeah, let's check it out there, birdie. let's see what's going on. Otherwise it's like, oh, I'm sorry, bird, I gotta go. I have 10 o'clock.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I think too, that's one of the things too that I've been really looking at in the last year, as, you know, sustainable and being able to learn the things that I need to learn, you know, on the land that I'm on, and be able to relate to everything around me, and have key relationships with it, to the birds and to the insects and, you know, the snakes and, you know, whatever else decides to show up and teach you a thing or two during the course of the day when you're more sustainable and on land. Anyway, just kind of a deep contemplation moment.
I think it's important to think about, because I feel like a lot of people who are really wanting to to get out and follow their real dreams, and maybe get out of whatever corporate or low energy job that they've got that they feel might be holding them back. Just go for it. You might lose it all, but then it'll come back. When you make life changes like that, that's what happened to me. I ended my career in the military and just sort of like stepped into the unknown, and it's been tough. It's been really tough, and it's been a really hard path. But at the same time, 5 years later, now I'm going somewhere. It's finally all working out. So it's not something to be scared of. It's a good challenge.
Well, you give up to get. So you give up, the worldly ideas, and then you find yourself. And, sometimes you don't like yourself a whole lot. So there's a lot of change that's necessary. So we're coming into commercial. So where can we find you? Where's your website at before we go to commercial?
Yes, my website is droughtproofex.com. So check it. Got a great
Okay, we're going to commercial. 4 minutes. Be back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss some quirky topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B, exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love, and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey, everybody, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And you can go there and look at the schedule, click schedule, and go to schedule A and studio A. And if you scroll down to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll see a bee with pollen on its legs flying towards the flower. Click on that. And there is some bio information and also contact information. And while you're there, click on the funding link and see different ways that you can fund us. One of my favorite ways is the heirloom seeds. So anyway, we're back, second hour on Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. And we are talking to Pete Van Dyck. And we've gotten a lot more history about him during the last first hour, but this is the second time that Pete has been on the show. And so we're just going to continue our conversation with him. And so I'm going to ask you a question. When I was going back to school for farming, and I ended up going to Steiner College, that was here in Sacramento, Rudolph Steiner College for biodynamics farming. Oh, wow. Yeah. And then it closed like in 2016, 30 years. It was a gem. It was like an unbelievable university. It was, yeah, can't believe that it actually closed. But anyway, so when I was going through that process, and I was, kind of like returning back to the earth and the soil, and, a lot of those types of philosophies and water. We're big water people in biodynamics because of Victor Schellenberger's work. And, but there were moments during that travel, that process that, were an insight or a revelation that would just hit you so hard in the head, that created like a massive change in me, and how I dealt with the world around me, or how I changed my life. Were there, once you got out of the Navy and you started this process, this journey, that your permaculture journey, land restoration journey, was there anything or several things in particular that you can remember that were the major, turning events or awakening events? So can you tell us about some of those?
Well, I think the biggest, probably one of the most life-changing things that happened to me was when I was in the military. I was going through basic underwater demolition SEAL training. And we did this thing called Hell Week. I'm sure you might have heard of it, where we go for 5.5 days with like 3 hours of sleep, and you're basically running and all this stuff. Basically, they're torturing us to make us quit. And, I got injured during that time and had nerve damage. my spine, and so they actually, after that happened, they rolled me back into a different class. And during that time when I was going through physical therapy and healing, I was actually being exposed to a lot more alternative ways of thinking. And that's when I actually, so right after that, like hardcore training, and I was like I was in the mix of it for the next 6 years now. Like it was happening. And that's when I sort of found out about the whole 9/11 scam job. And so at that point in time, I realized that the world was not what it had seemed to me before. And all of a sudden, I started searching for, whatever source of information I could get to tell me the truth of what's actually happening, what's actually going on in the world. And so my little bubble was shattered, and I had to go on and proceed anyways through my contract with the military. But that was a huge moment for me. Just sort of realizing the lies and pretty much everything I'd ever been told was false. And I had really, after that, sort of went out on my own investigations of what I should be doing with my life. So that totally changed me. And then the next thing that happened was, and it was actually not that long ago. It was pretty recently. I actually was getting interviewed by someone, and they asked me what I thought the connection was between soil and water. And I don't know why, I just sort of blurted it out like instantly. I was like, oh, well, that's easy. The answer is plants. So, there's this thing called the water cycle, where we know that rainfall comes from the sky, and it goes and comes down the hillsides and seeps into holes in the landscape and comes out as springs and all this stuff, and you have evapotranspiration and all that. But I think the part that a lot of people miss is that the plants are actually a huge part of the water cycle, and there ought to be this green layer between the soil and the atmosphere, which we are continually these days degrading, so that there's actually less green plants growing on the surface of the soil than there was, or that there could be. And that to me was a huge aha moment, because I was like, wow, we really do have the ability to change, the conditions of our environment and moderate the climate and improve the soil, improve our atmosphere. And it really is mostly to do with plants. So we talk about the soil a lot and the importance of soil microorganisms. Well, they are feeding off of plants, and without the plants, you wouldn't have any of those. So that was a huge revelation for me. And ever since then, I've been sort of on this mission to go out and tell people how we're going to drought-proof the state of Texas. And I tell them we're going to do it with plants. And they all sort of look at me like I'm crazy, because we all know that plants just suck up all the water, right?
Well, one of the basics of Rudolf Steiner's teachings, is basically, and cows have it. That's why we use horn manure prep, and we put them in cow horns and put them in the ground, because there's a certain receptivity, like an acupuncture needle on that point on Earth. And so plants, on the high spiritual level, Rudolf Steiner's work, depending on the type, how the leaf goes up, causes a different reception to the cosmos. And so they say that it brings the cosmos into the water and the soil, right? So it also brings like an antenna, a whole bunch of other information that's not there. And then all the nutrient that it pulls in from its environment that it can establish in the soil. And then different types of chemistry. Then you get into chemistry because each plant has a different kind of chemical makeup that it's bringing, or information. Remember, like we were saying about that seed having 5,000 years of information, like a computer chip. You know, the plants have that too. Kind of a thing, you know, kind of. So, you know, I kind of feel like I've got in some fights and arguments with people who are kind of more doing, you know, philosophies and large scale restoration. But for me, I had the plant moment that you could fix the land with the plants, you know, before I started learning about how to do like permaculture stuff and, you know, retaining water and a lot of that kind of stuff. So I've had arguments with people who are doing kind of large landscape work and stuff like that about the fact that what if we started using a lot of these native seeds and we started putting them into these environments, you know, like a lot of these native corns, because, you know, some grasses started out as corn, you know, they're in the corn family. But they get mad because they say, well, we can't, you know, put that into the environment because it's not native. But nothing in America would be native. I mean, because it would all, I mean, they showed that so many tribes brought up all kinds of plants and seeds and everything from South America and then other countries. I mean, so what in America, what really is native? We don't even really know that. And wouldn't be seeds that have been collected by indigenous people around the world be native? You know, and why couldn't we plant things all over? Because you know, this summer I got to work with sorghum. I got to work with this native, it comes from Africa, India kind of area, and it's called popping sorghum. And it looks sort of like a corn plant. And then it puts out this, anyway, I loved sorghum. I wasn't sure what to do with it after, so I let the birds eat the seeds and I composted the plant. But it was the coolest plant, and it's considered a grass in Africa, right? And it grows these seeds and it reseeds itself, you know, and animals would eat that. And animals would be able to carry them off to other locations and sometimes poop them out because some of the seeds have a coating, right? And so you could start to, you know, by putting some of these plants in, and then people got really angry at me that were traditionalists, right? In the US and said, well, you can't, you know, put that kind of stuff in. And it's like, well, why not? It's a 5,000-year-old plant. It seems like it might be older than some of the native stuff we have here. And a lot of the native stuff that people are planting into, you know, fixing land and restoration don't have a lot of seeds on it. Where's the food for the animals?
Sure.
Because you got to have...
Go ahead.
What are your thoughts? I mean, are you like a traditionalist? Like, we've only found these things in Texas, so these are the only things we're going to plant? Or, I mean, are you more open to saying, hey, you know, the more grass we plant, diversified grass, and if it has seeds for the animals, hey, that's great. I don't care if it comes from Africa or Bombay. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's actually a lot of that kind of stuff going on around here in Texas. Basically, there's two schools of thought. There's the people who just want to revegetate the planet, whatever means possible, and I've kind of put myself in that category. And then there's this very strict native plants only school of thought, and you know, I think that's great. The problem is that they think that, I guess, that nature is static, or that the environment is in some static form where if you restore it, that means bringing it back to the way it used to be, but it's always changing. So I love native plants, and we use a lot of native plants in our work. You know, that's one of the most important things that we try to promote in our work. But I am not against planting cover crops or trees from foreign places. You know, we plant a lot of species here in Texas from China. There's a lot of really valuable medicinal plants and a lot of valuable edible plants that you can grow here from different regions of the earth. And I think that's, what is that known as? That's, you have analog climates, so like somewhere in China, those plants over there are growing in same conditions as they are here. And I think it's really important that humans use that skill. I mean, we're really good at moving things around, and we're really good at taking seeds, new species to different places. I think that's one of the most important things people should be doing. So I'm all for it. I think, use whatever you can to help you out, and, take responsibility for anything bad that happens. And, don't be scared to go out and plant stuff that's going to grow well where you are, especially if it's food crops. I'm not a purist at all when it comes to that.
Well, and this other new philosophy, that I've kind of been getting into, because I have two people who've been on my show, but also that I'm, working with and hoping to work with a lot in the future, doing, native seed outgrows, returning a lot of the, tribes and from all over the globe that have certain kinds of native seeds, and doing outgrows, because some of the seeds are going extinct. And so one of the focuses of that thought process is that, it goes back to like kind of the native way, where, you leave a third for the environment. So, you leave a third of whatever you've got there for the animals of that area. So you make sure and grow enough. So like this year I grew, double the amount of, quadruple the amount of Hopi sunflowers, because, I had to give a quarter of them away to the birds afterwards.
Yeah.
And then you keep some, and then you give some to other, native tribal people in the area in which you grow that. And then you send some back to be, like a giveaway or being put in a seed bank, but that the seeds are never, you can trade with them if you need something, but you ultimately have to give them away for free, because that's the only sovereignty for most insects and animals and humans, is the seed. So, you're talking about, it goes the plant, there's the plant that's starting to play a significant role. I've like moved to this other place where I'm like, the seed matters. I mean, next to water, it may be the only other thing that matters is having seeds, being able to take seeds with you. In the ancient times, I was reading that they would sow the seeds if they had to travel long distances, to move to different places, that they would hide the seeds. They'd sow them into different parts of their shoes and their socks, their coats, their garments, their hats, because it meant whether they were going to be able to live or die.
Yeah.
It was like the difference. And I think we're there now. People just don't know it. And this other thing too is, most of things that we've made, whether it's clothing or products or technology, the first car was made with hemp, right? It didn't have plastic, it had hemp. And pretty much you can grow anything. And if you assimilate seeds from other places that are native, that have been used for certain kinds of things like clothing or making of all kinds of different stuff, then eventually on pieces of land, you're going to have everything that you could possibly need by growing it, that you can utilize to make anything that you're going to ever need on your land.
Yeah.
So the seed is like, about sustainability as well. But yeah, sometimes like you don't, and I'm sure that this, but, the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, dealing with soil and water, the more astonished you become, of what you didn't know, even though you walk on it every day, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think, one of the main things that really kind of, I guess, upsets me or maybe even disturbs me is that, like, someone who's a native plant, or quote unquote native plant, like purist, they would be definitely willing to go out. Look at that hog. They'd definitely be willing to go out and Sorry, there's this huge hog that just walked up to us. Anyways, they'd definitely be willing to go out and spray poison on riverbanks and rip out vegetation on areas that are sensitive, when it really, they should be protecting that area instead of trying to destroy it. And the reason that stuff is happening, we have, I guess, native plant invasions, quote unquote, invading plants. Well, that's largely due to ecological destruction dealt by humans. And the real solution to me is that we start going uphill and start to solve the problems of erosion, and prevent these niches from forming, which the non-native plants come and habitate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like insects. You have plagues of insects in certain areas. It's because of an imbalance. And I think it goes back to everything's trying to survive right now. It's all in survival mode. And in order to kind of fix the land, you're going to have to, get it into, out of survival mode into balance, where everything kind of stops running that program. Because that's where you're going to get rogue, plants and rogue weeds and, all these other kinds of things, because those weeds thrive in places that, edible plants, well, I can't really say that, but because, you have things like purslane that grows in cities and, usually in cracks, which is highly edible, has like the highest amount of 3, 6, and 9 essential fatty acids per volume. And we treat it like a weed, we poison it. Oh, we can't have it in that crack.
Right. You need to keep Roundup out and carry on there.
But most, being out in the desert used to just be sand and sagebrush, and then rabbit brush really moved in over the course of my life, and a lot of other stuff. And one thing I've learned in biodynamics is we did cultivate a lot of weeds, certain kinds of edible weeds that we would use in our diet, because weeds had tons of nutrients. And they also had a different kind of process, because they would grow in places to heal areas. So sometimes when I see a lot of this, overtaking of certain kinds of plants, I think, well, maybe that plant has been called there, and for some reason or not, and that, our job is to figure out what the balance is to keep it in balance. Instead of trying to eradicate it or destroy it. But I mean, that's like kind of the mindset. And that's one thing, like working with multicultural, which we're kind of going back to. But when I lived in Taos, New Mexico, this is kind of funny, but I'll throw myself under the bus. No, I'm just kidding. So I was living in Taos, and I was helping, and I was going to a lot of these. Taos, New Mexico had some fantastic stuff going on when I was there. There was all kinds of different organizations that were doing the first kind of documentaries, whistleblowing on stuff. So they had a theater there where they would invite you, the whole town and public could come for free, and they'd give different talks. And we had native people that had nuclear boards that were trying to deal with the nuclear radiation in New Mexico, and hired their own scientists and report in and educate the public on a lot of that, and just everything, food sovereignty. I met the founder of Food Not Bombs, Keith McHenry, who I talk to periodically, and he's on my show. And just a lot of amazing things that happened down there. But I went to they had this place, and it was set up, it was a nonprofit, so that the local people could come there and use the kitchen, because it's, got all of its authorizations and safety regulations and all that other stuff. And a lot of these people would have products that they would make. So they got to use this nonprofit kitchen, and then they could sell their products, like salsa and stuff, into the public. One of the things that they did there was they had a huge garden area. They do like a winter crop on it, like barley, and sell it, and then give it or sell it to the local brewery. And they had a greenhouse, and so growing all the food was volunteer. And there was a big native guy, Pueblo guy, And there was a Hispanic man whose family had been there, for like 400 years of farming and stuff. And they ran the farming end of it. And they also were bringing back the sacred slaughter that the natives have been doing for thousands of years, before they take the life of the animal. And so they had this mobile unit, and they'd go out and perform the whole sacred slaughter for farmers and then help to slaughter their animals in the sacred ways, kind of a thing. One of the things I learned when I was at Taos was, because I'm a mover and shaker, I forget that I look white sometimes, and so I'm out there going, yeah, I'll help you get that done. I'll be here. I'll put in 20 hours, I'll make this happen. And then I was like, well, New Mexico does run pretty darn good, and so having these conversations with some of the Native people and Hispanic people, and they're like, yeah, you know why it runs so good? And I'm like, no, why does it work so good? And there's all these things that are built for community and to assist community and community growth and all this other stuff. They're like, because there's no white people running it. And they were so true. I was like, no way, it's so true. There's, the people, they're cultures that have been working together in community forever. Yeah. I mean, the Pueblos are all the way around, New Mexico. They had these fire things that they would set. So that's why it was really hard for the Spaniards, and, any time that they've tried to infiltrate them and destroy them and kick them off their land, it hasn't really worked out well, because they all were separate tribes, but they all worked together, and they had systems to alert each other. So if there was a threat to one of them, there was a threat to all of them, and they could get in there and fight it off. So they, like Taos, Pueblo, they're the only people, I think, in the United States that were never forced off their original land. And there are areas that are so sacred that no one's really allowed on, just the medicine people of the Taos, Pueblo. So, and they grow a lot of, they have native celery, of course, wild rice, things like that. But these are all things, that could be, put back into nature, because they've been growing them for thousands of years. They were nature. I mean, they adapted to nature and found out what was good and edible, and then have cultivated it, for a long, long time. But anyway, sometimes, like, and one of the things that I grew up with was competitiveness. I grew up with a father who didn't want to go in the military, but was forced in World War II. And he ended up being a really good shooter and a sniper. And I think it affected him, most of his life, but he always put really good principles into me about, working with the community, taking care of everybody, you know what I mean? Like, if you see somebody that's older and they're carrying something, go carry it for them, go help people out in your community. And I see a lot of people that I was raised with in Nevada in particular, because it is a pretty hardcore, it was when I was growing up, kind of white supremacy state, that they have a lot of problems, and they have, don't deal well with community. They don't deal well with their families, and they, are angry. They're older and angry now, and they're not willing to be able to let go of their mindset, and stick their hand out across the aisle and say, hey, I don't know anything about you or your culture, but, hey, can we be friends? Can we get to know each other? Can I ask you questions? And then find the common theme and focus in on that work. And the common theme for lots of people from around the world is food and soil and water.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line that serves us all, and that, we have to serve. Anyway, just some thoughts. So anyway, go ahead. What else you got on your mind? Talk to us about some other cool stuff.
Well, like I said, we've got this 53 acres that we're working on. It's like our little home farm, and so we're starting a little business, and right now we've got a Airbnb house that we are renting out to people, and that's been pretty good for us. We've been probably making about $1,000 a month just off one bedroom rental, and we're also doing these educational things at our farm. And the ultimate, we're trying to save up enough money to start building the infrastructure for our farm. We got to do some fencing and some irrigation work, and so we're getting really close. And I'm really excited about getting some sheep and some chickens and starting to produce our own food. Like that's always been a dream of mine, and we're starting to get really close now. We do have a garden, a small garden. It's about 6,000 square foot of garden, and that's where we're growing a lot of our medicinal herbs and veggies and stuff like that. But we have a lot of white-tailed deer on our property that we are having to manage. So we are doing some hunting and taking advantage of that. So I've got quite a bit of quite a full freezer of meat from the harvest this winter, and that's all going towards feeding us. And we're really getting close to being more and more sustainable and self-sufficient on our farm. That's really the goal that I'm moving towards, and it's getting really close. And I think more people should start doing that and getting into it. And the trouble is that there's this whole society and system that we have to work with that's already in place, and so there's trouble, getting the financing for all the stuff we need to do, and it's not always easy. But I don't know. That's really my main projects right now. I'm of course doing a lot of other things, conventional construction stuff. I'm installing water lines and doing fencing projects and property designs for other people. But I'm most passionate about getting our farm up and running and just having our own little quiet space in the world.
Yeah, I think the world. I've been a studier of shamanism, like ancient types of shamanism, not the modern kind, for my entire life. And one of the philosophies in like dreaming type medicines and things like that are that this world is a pretty tough world, and that it constantly is basically puncturing holes in your energetic field, and that it takes and consumes a lot of work, and you end up with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder kind of things. And really, until you kind of move away from a lot of that stress, like buy a little piece of land and start getting a couple animals and start to learning the farming process, there's something about the nutrient and the soil and what it off gases like carbon and things like that we absorb that help to heal our body from the tension and the stress, and also the quiet, and then also getting back into deeper modes of sleep. And usually that's helpful from a lot of the physical labor that you need to do. But you can really heal huge amounts of post-traumatic stress disorder and anything that you've been through in your life by starting to cultivate and have a relationship with even a small piece of land, even what's in your backyard. Healing and restoring it, is an act of healing and restoring yourself. And sometimes, it's nice to have that quiet, to actually have real quiet where you don't even hear anything but what nature symphony. And could be really healing to your mind.
Absolutely. And I've been doing a lot of reading during this time too, reading Schauberger and some of the Steiner stuff, and I've been really poring over a lot of books. I can't remember the guy who wrote the book about the name of the guy, but he wrote the book about insects and their antennas and their different wavelengths that they're I guess, catching with their antennas.
Yeah, that's from the Steiner movement, right? Probably.
Oh, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a really, really great book. What was it? But anyways, I'm sort of been diving into more and more interesting topics, and with the spiritual stuff, I've really realized over the past maybe 5 to 10 years that I totally am creating my own reality, and I guess manifesting things. I don't know if that's usually how it works, but it seems that as fast as things are moving for me, and maybe it's because I'm thinking about it so hard and working so hard to achieve the goals that I'm setting for myself, it's almost like they're coming faster than I had anticipated. With this land that we have, I really just, I was living in a pretty rundown shack trailer house for a while there, and then all of a sudden I was just kind of catapulted into a really nice house with probably some of the best land that you could get around in the area, and I had just attracted that to myself through the work I was doing, and it was almost like I had already imagined it in my mind, and then 2 years later I was there, and it was better than I thought. You know what I mean? That I had imagined was possible. So there's something to that, man. It's like just thinking intently about things and having that intention of what you want to try and accomplish. It really does work. I'm sure of it.
Well, this is the one thing that I've learned is, walking kind of with nature and stuff and trying to get back to a place, more of natural law, is that there's the creator, right? Some of my teachers call, the creator of all things. And some of my native teachers look at it as an AI, the original system, that created everything, right? And then we're here to co-create, but the creation that was created is the earth and the natural law and the systems of that natural law. And so when we finally surrender to, not being out there in the system or that world, and we become more back into natural law, we become the co-creators of the creation. So the creation starts to teach us things, the natural world and the planet. And then when we start to co-create that, then that's when things really start, I think, to move, because you're in that, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing here, and learning from the things that you're supposed to be learning from, and being in relation to, having a relationship with. And I think that's the catalyst for, not word manifestation, but let's just say living in the flow, the right flow, not the wrong flow.
Right. Well, it's funny. Before I really started teaching the design work that I'm doing and teaching about everything that I've learned so far, I had never met a shaman before in my life, or at least I didn't know if I had. And then all of a sudden I started teaching and sharing all the stuff that I was doing, and then boom, all of a sudden there's shamans all around me. You know what I mean? Maybe they just revealed themselves. I'm not sure, but I've met, quite a few just in the last year. And it's been pretty cool. Seems like they've confirmed what is happening to me with this, I guess you would call it manifestations of the world as I see it in my mind, and then it sort of happening. It sort of, I guess, kind of calms me to the, I guess, the alertness that brings once that happens to you. You know what I mean? I didn't know that was going to happen or realize what was going on until I just sort of accepted that, I can do anything that I want, and I can I can achieve anything that I want, and all I have to do is just believe in that and know that it's going to happen, and also accept the fact that it's not going to be easy, you know. So it's been pretty interesting, this journey that I've been on, and meeting all these new folks.
Yeah. No, it's super good. I think, like you're saying, plants kind of has come into the focus. Plants kind of offer a whole different kind of, like spiritual layer to everything. And they bring in like different people, and kind of build the communities, because I think plants live in communities. So you start to like think more about those plants and how to grow them and how to get them growing, and how to shuffle their spawn here and there. And then you start to see different kinds of people show up in your community, so that you have more plants, so you're taking on different philosophies and ideas. So I think, the plant leads us more down the community path than soil and water. But
one thing that's also interesting is there's definitely, so we're not the only people in Texas teaching permaculture. There's quite a few permaculture design courses going around. And it's just interesting to see the different types of people that go to the different courses, based on, how they act in the public sphere of things, or, how people act on Facebook or whatever. I'm not personally on Facebook, but my girlfriend is, so I see a lot of weird things on there. And so it's weird because we've sort of attracted this more spiritual crowd and a more intellectual and educated crowd. So we've got really professional, highly educated people, and we've got these really deep spiritual people who have come to our course. And I don't know if it's like the vibe we're putting out, but I haven't really seen that in a lot of other permaculture design course settings. Like, for some reason, maybe it's just the location of our site, but there's all kinds of interesting things happening in the different, I guess, cliques or groups of people that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, well, my teacher Bobido would say, I always talk about him. He passed in June 2016. Shoshone medicine man, incredible what his abilities were, he could do. But he would say that, when we have a polarity like that, we're attracting a polarity, because that's a pretty extreme polarity. The business intellectuals and spiritual kind of people. He would say that, we're the middle. That means that, we're learning how to come into balance, that, we can hold, dualistic or polarity extremes, and balance them in a way, right? Which is ultimately like, if they talk a lot about medicine wheels and stuff, and I've studied some Native people's work that talk about it on an internal and external and just different multiple levels of where it plays out. And that your position in your own personal medicine wheel would be like in the center. And then you have all the directions, 7 directions around you. And so, that's a pretty big deal, like to be able to come into balance to where you have such a duality, being attracted to you from one extreme to the other and being able to hold it somewhere in the center. So that's actually a pretty good feat. That's a good thing.
I know it's amazing because we have, and in our previous class we had the head of the Texas's division of the Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's a Department of Interior branch of federal government. So we had this guy. He manages over 1 million acres of land in Texas. Extreme professional, just like totally highly educated, really, really great guy. And we've got quite a few other people who are sort of on the same level, but not, working for the government. And then we've got like all these shamans in the class, and it's interesting that they actually all work together pretty well. And I was surprised to see that a lot of them actually have similar beliefs. Even spiritual beliefs are starting to know that, our intentions and our thoughts actually do have an effect on things, and it's almost like we're working together to manage that and sort of manifest something that's I guess using appropriate technology and also using our spiritual powers, I guess, that we have to make really interesting and positive effects happen. It to me, like, I grew up in Oklahoma in this huge, well, I guess very, very small bubble, where there was nothing weird going on. I didn't know anything about anywhere else. In fact, I didn't know anything about anything. So being sort of launched into this group of people has been really interesting to me. I never thought that would happen, but here we are.
Yeah, no, and so this is kind of something that I've been working on because I'm not really like a math person, and one of my really good friends, Dr. Lenny Time, he's a PhD chemist. He's like totally out of the box now. He only does things where he's not really in the system. He didn't really want his retirement or anything else like that. He wants to just be out of the system and figure out ways to do things without money and still be able to do kind of his scientific work that he wants to do, while evolving, spiritually. And he talks to me all the time. We have these crazy conversations, on Skype sometimes. And he talks about, the Fibonacci and how the numbers, jump, and he's working on ways to figure out how, those sequences really work in communities. Like he's kind of creating like a scientific baseline, and it's interesting because the more people that you get, like, that are kind of have a similarity, it starts jumping those numbers up more rapidly, and you can get more things done on, different levels, because it's everything, kind of runs off a Fibonacci sequence. So, it starts out with the small numbers, and then it just all of a sudden starts jumping. You have like 8 people involved, and now it amplifies it to, who knows, 39 or something like that. So it's for me, it's kind of interesting how that plays out too, and how, when you do start getting more people involved in certain community things, like how much more I guess it expands, and how much more rapidly it expands, which is a good thing. That's why if we would all kind of come together for a common goal and work together, we could change things really fast on this planet. But no, we have to fight against each other, and
There's so, and I see, I've pretty much totally pulled myself away from politics and mainstream media and all that junk and that garbage, because there's only one purpose, is that's to divide everyone and make us all hate each other. And to me, none of that makes any sense. So I've just totally pulled away from that, and I don't even hardly talk to anyone about politics or anything like that anymore, because I know we're not going to agree on it. You know what I mean? So my main focus has really been to get away from all of that stuff, and then just really clinch down on like things that matter. And that's been really helpful for me when communicating with these vast groups of people, is just to drop all that stuff and don't even bring it up. There's more important things to be concerning ourselves with and talking about than what's happening in the mainstream media, or what Donald Trump is doing. You know what I mean? Like, none of that stuff is in my control. So what I have been able to control is the words coming out of my mouth and what people are hearing from me that affects their life. And it's all positive stuff. And I think that has been the key to bringing these very interesting and influential groups of people together. Because otherwise, if you bring that stuff up, it just doesn't work. You can't talk to anyone. You know, it's almost like it's meant to drive us apart like a wedge. You know.
Yeah. No, the seed is like focus on plants and seeds, you know, and water and soil. It's something that, you know, once people are educated, there's nothing really to disagree about.
Right. All that other stuff just sort of falls away.
Yeah, when you have tons of people that are homeless and starving and, you know, have zero access to food. I saw this thing on the internet yesterday that the store has created this little weird car, and it can go up to 2 or 3 miles from the grocery store. So you don't even have to like go in there and shop at the grocery store. Like, you don't have a relationship with your food at all. Like, you're not even like doing the basic picking it out of a pile, you know?
Right.
Like, that's, and when you have, then, I mean, it's so out of touch with, like, you know, the other 95% of the world that's starving and has no access to food, and their seeds have been contaminated, and, you know, there's no food sovereignty because, you know, there's no seed sharing. And things like that going on. And that really is the only thing that matters, is like there shouldn't be like one person on this planet that isn't eating a good quality, high density, nutritional meal. Period. End of story.
I think we can do a lot to help achieve that.
Nope, I think I lost you.
Oh, I said.
Oh, there. Okay.
Well, I think there's a lot of stuff we can do to achieve that, you know.
Yeah. No, huge amounts.
We have all the skill and ability, you know, that is needed to make that happen.
Yeah, we have a lot of knowledgeable people that are becoming more and more educated, you know, and also people that can lead groups to educate them during processes of, you know, restoring land or growing food or whatever else. Yeah, you just have to. The only thing about food and soil and water restoration and all this other stuff is that you have to show up and you have to get some education, and you might have to actually do a little physical work and you're good to go. Those are like the only things you really have to commit to.
Yep. And that's exactly why we're out here right now on this farm here in Elgin, Texas, doing this volunteer event, is to get people out in the soil, digging trenches and planting stuff and moving their bodies and breathing the somewhat clean, fresh air. You know, we're like 25 minutes from downtown Austin, so it's, you know, somewhat clean. But that's the point. That's what we're trying to do, and it's been really fulfilling for me. And I hope a lot of other people will start to get out there and make some volunteer groups like this, like what we're doing here with Earth Repair Corps. It's really simple. You just go and help your neighbors, help the people who need it, and a lot of good things start coming your way.
Yeah, and eat good, clean, or as clean as possible food, and that food is what you grow. And then it becomes medicine too. When you oversee your plants and you take care of them, they become the medicine you need for whatever ails you, whatever your illness is. Mm-hmm. So it's good and important to have a relationship with the food that you're putting in your mouth and your family's mouth. Hey, so anyway, we got 2 minutes to go here. So tell us where people can find you, all the different places where they can find you.
Well, I do have a business Facebook page, and that is called Drought Proof Texas. You can go and see some of the projects that we've done and all the places that I've been going to speak recently. And my website is www.droughtprooftx.com. And there you can find out all about our services. And we have got a really great blog on there that a lot of people have complimented me on with all the great information that we're putting out. So please check it out and leave us some comments and like my Facebook page and help get the word out about what we're doing. And I really appreciate being invited onto the show with you, Bridgette. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I always like talking to people. You know, I hate interviewing people. You know, I like actually talking to them and having a conversation, because sometimes that's where the most important information comes out. You know, comes out that this is what you were doing, and then you decide, wow, that's really not what I want to do anymore, and made a radical U-turn, you know, immediately, and headed down this road, and this is what happened, and this is who I've become. And those conversations, I think, are really important sometimes, you know, to encourage people to, you know, at least look out in the world and think about what they would like to be involved with. If they didn't have to make a paycheck, what is it that you feel passionate about? Feeding the homeless, taking care of children, you know, helping rescue animals, you know, creating farm places, you know, all those different kinds of things. So anyway, thanks, Pete, for being on my show. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, have a great week. See you next Saturday. Thank you.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial-free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank or all the